Rolling. All right, we are recording. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the virtual brown bag of January 21st of 2021. Getting things rolling as usual. We let everybody know that we do record these meetings. So if you are, please do share things with us, but just be aware that this is being recorded. It's going to be out in the wild, so just don't get in trouble. What is the virtual brown bag? It's a place where we get together, we share tips and tricks, tools, shortcuts, articles that you've read, books, what have you, share with others. Experiences, things that we've learned the hard way. Maybe we found a great way to do it, or maybe we're not happy with how we managed to do it. Run it by other folks here on the call, and somebody else may be able to help you out. We do this every Thursday from 12 to 1 Central Time here on Skype. It's always on the same link, at least for now. Last night I had another meeting with another group, and Skype froze on this computer again. I don't know if it's the computer or if it's Skype. I still have to troubleshoot that. But anyways, feel free to share the link with folks who might be interested in joining. We've been over a whole bunch of topics ranging from, very deeply technical topics all the way up to like more high level soft skills type of things like job interviews and things like that, and Pomodoro technique and a bunch of stuff. We've been all over the map, and it's always fun. So feel free to share. We have a virtualbrownbag.com website where you can always find the link to this meeting, as well as link to the videos of previous meetings with a little blurb of the main topics that we've discussed on each one of those, if you want to go back and catch up with some of the conversation. And other than that, let's roll. I can probably just quickly share one thing that came up yesterday that I've been sharing around. For folks who are in Houston, Improving Houston, this is the office where I'm at. We are hiring. These are some of the positions that we currently have. So if you're interested, or if you know somebody who might be interested, just shoot me an email. I'm at claudio.lasala, LASSALA, at improving.com. Just send me an email, and then I can hook you up and point you in the right direction. Other than that, what's happening? What's cooking?
I didn't know y'all did Java.
We do have, Java. We're really all over the board. I mean, we are mostly in .NET Microsoft space, but we do have Java. We do have like Office 365 and a whole like data division as well. Because different offices may have like more Java projects than others, but it's pretty well spread out.
How large is Improving now, anyway?
We've just surpassed 1,000 employees with the recent acquisition. So in 2021, we acquired two new offices, two new companies, including one company that has two offices in Mexico. So now we are in Mexico, the US, and Canada. And it's about nice. 13, 14 offices in North America, if I'm keeping the count straight. So, yeah.
And y'all are looking just in Houston, right?
Yes, these opportunities are for Houston. Of course, currently, most of them will be like remote work type of things. But as we prepare for, eventually going back to in person, we just want to make sure that folks are, in Houston or surrounding areas.
Cool. That's interesting. That's the second time in 2 days I've seen a need for a senior automation person. Because I had seen like a dearth of that for a year or so, and I was kind of surprised by it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad that's starting back up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What else has been going on with people? Andrew, what's been going on with you?
Pain, lots of pain on a project.
Okay.
So yeah, I've inherited a WinForms app that's been worked on by an offshore team for the past 5 years, and it's now needs to be modernized. And so I've kind of gone through it's going to make a really interesting case study. So like what I've done with it over the past couple months is I did a technical analysis and put together a super long 200-page report for the executives at my company to determine what direction we can go with it. And so that was the first time I put together a report of that long, but it was really interesting being able to go in to the project, see all of the lack of best practices, and then being able to formally describe that to somebody that's not a developer, and go through that process of, well, here's what the project looks like right now with the team that we have. If you give me a certain amount of dollars and team members, we can take it. Here's where it can be in the next 6 months or 12 months. So it's been painful looking at this project, but at the same time, it's been a really interesting learning opportunity for me to kind of go through that side of the development, I guess, team building side of it. And the goal is we're trying to take this WinForms app and migrate it to UWP and Uno platform.
Into where? The Uno platform?
Yeah, have you for
No,
Uno
I haven't
platform
heard.
still? Yeah, it's still relatively new, but they got a lot of support from Microsoft. Uno platform is built on top of Xamarin Native, so not Xamarin Forms, but Xamarin Native. So the bindings that Microsoft has so you can write C# against iOS and Android and so forth. So what it is, it's a WinUI bridge for the different platforms. So I can take a UWP app that runs on your desktop today, compile it under Uno platform, and it will run on iOS, Android, Mac OS, Ubuntu, WebAssembly, all pixel perfect. So you don't like one of the downsides with Xamarin Forms is, oh, I got it working in Android. This looks great. All the materials there, and then I go and run it in iOS. I'm like, oh, this looks like junk. What did I do?
Okay, so does
Um,
it re-implements all the controls for that
yeah,
platform?
yeah.
Okay.
So what they did is they took the UWP spec, which is now there's a lot of confusion, which is now forming into the WinUI spec, and they said, well, this is a really good application spec. Well, let's go and implement it in iOS. Let's implement it in Android. Let's go implement it in WebAssembly and all these other platforms. So the controls look exactly the way they do in UWP, but they're using native controls. So it makes it really easy to develop because I can go and just develop. The recommendation from the CTO of Uno platform has told me the way they build their apps was they build them in UWP, and once they're done, or once they get like a feature done, they test it in iOS and Android. And as long as you're not dealing with the native with like let's say file IO or native APIs, it will work. I mean, you'll have to do the different platforms for those native components. So like I need to do any type of file IO, I'll need to write my iOS code for that, my Android code for that, my UWP code for that. But because of the .NET Standard, a lot of that stuff has been implemented already for you. So there are still native components to it, but the nice thing is it's the UI is shared much better than Xamarin Forms does because you get that pixel perfection. And if you want to use the native styling, you still can do that. There's a flag that you do to switch between the UWP Fluent styles versus the native styles, so you can still have it look like Material and iOS and all of it. It's a
Hold
really
on.
interesting platform.
Yeah, I'm unclear how that works because like the styling is not disconnected from function. I mean, maybe it is. I haven't done like a lot of hardcore iOS stuff. I know like on web in web tech, like the styling of a select menu is not disconnected at all from the actual functionality. It's super strongly coupled, and you can't just go in and style a select differently. So what platforms like React Native do is like they just implement their own version of a select, but then the problem that happens with that, and I don't know, maybe like you can speak of this, how UWP handles it, the problem that happens with that is that it's easy enough to kind of like slap together something that kind of works like a select, but like when you think about the entire realm of accessibility, like no, like the select is very, very, very specially tuned to work the way it does work, and is super, super difficult to get right if you're trying to be, like it's a massive effort to get something to be as accessible as the native system provides.
Right.
Yeah.
That's always
yeah.
That's always been the big buy-in for me for something like Xamarin Forms. I've looked at Flutter, I've looked at React Native and the other ones, and with some of my web background, I was like, well, React Native might make sense, but it doesn't get me as close to the metal as Xamarin Forms does, and they have their own problems with it because of it's a massive abstraction layer. I'm excited to see what they do with .NET MAUI for the release of .NET 6 in November this year. But you're still at the end of the day, you're still working with native bits.
Yeah, Xamarin Forms, if you compile it for iOS and you drop a select on the screen, it's a native iOS.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, so like one of the
UWP is it?
So Uno platform is also native in that regard. And one of the coolest things I saw with Xamarin Forms was Frank Kruger made this really cool library called Wii Platform. It's spelled OOUI. I think it's OOUI.forms. It's really just a proof of concept. But what he did was he took the Xamarin Forms implementation and built it for the web. And basically it just created the HTML tags and just injected them into the DOM. And it worked really well for the proof of concept. And when I do my intro to Xamarin Forms lecture session, I usually show that first and say, well, a lot of people tell me, well, Xamarin Forms is not native controls. I say, well, this is a Xamarin Forms app. We see it running on Android. Let's compile it for the web. We compile it for the web. And then I go right click and view source and say, this is all HTML objects. It is really rendering the native, and that usually gets to click for everyone. Same thing's happening in Uno platform, but the difference is Xamarin Forms made their own types of, they made their own implementation going from shared code to native code. Uno platform, instead of using a different specification, they took the UWP specification and implemented those natively on the different platforms.
But then how? I don't understand how it is that you're saying it's pixel perfect, because like a select on Android doesn't look like a select on iOS and doesn't look like a select on the web, right?
So they styled them natively to look like Fluent, but if you want to turn the Fluent design on,
whatever styling options.
Like you could change the height of the text, the color of the text, the font of the text. The default styles is Fluent, so everything looks pixel perfect. Yeah, it's a lot of dark black magic. When I first looked at it, I was like, how is this even working? I don't get this. It didn't make any sense to me. And I was on a live stream with one of the contributors to Uno platform, and we were just kind of going through the project. And my big $1 million question to him was, in Xamarin Forms, I know exactly how to get to the native bits. How do I do it in Uno platform? And if you're familiar with UWP development, they control template everything. So a control template is a way to restyle a control. So you say, I want to create a text box, but if you use a control template, you can make a grid, and then you could have 100 different things in there. But when you write your XAML, it's just being a text block. So there's this nifty architecture, or I guess would be a pattern, or no, it's a technique, I guess, of control templates in UWP. So what they did is, it's basically a way to apply custom styles and expand upon with a series of controls that would map to one control. And what they did to get their native bits is inside the control template, they're actually drawing the native iOS or Android or WebAssembly object right there in the control template. So it actually makes it very easy to swap that between different styles if you wanted to, without having to rebuild a lot of stuff. It's quite impressive once you get into the implementation details of it, but from a high level, it's very easy to use, very easy to build cross-platform applications. So my requirements for this project is we have this WinForms app, and we need a web app, we need an iOS app, we need an Android app, we still need to support the desktop app. And I thought, well, if we can migrate this project to UWP, I could then compile it under Uno platform, and outside of some native API access, we have this entire application working across those 4 platforms. Because some of our customers want this as a desktop app, some don't want the install footprint, so they want it as a web app. So it'll give us a lot of bang for our buck. And the nice thing is, when there's problems that come in from the field, we fix it in one place, we'll have it across all those 4 platforms.
Okay, cool. No, I mean that is definitely cool stuff. Have you actually tried to run the WebAssembly version? You said you did.
Oh yeah. I've been researching Uno platform for about a year now, maybe a little more than a year, and I put together a nice getting started blog series. I did end of last year. Let me get the link for that.
Is it on top of Blazor, or is it its own thing?
Oh, it's its own thing. So they use the Mono WebAssembly layer, but it's not built on top of Blazor. They're working actually very closely with the Windows app dev team and Blazor on the WebAssembly stuff as well. They're not owned by Microsoft, but they have a lot of good connections there to help with some of their development efforts. Like they were doing code generation before Roslyn came out.
So you're writing C#. It's getting compiled by the Mono compiler against the Mono.NET runtime. Against the Mono.NET, the Mono runtime is getting packaged all and compiled via WebAssembly and sent over to the browser with DOM bindings in. That kind of what's going on.
Yep. Yeah. So what happens with the WebAssembly, and this might have changed because they're moving lightning fast over there, is when you do the WebAssembly, the page loads and it uses the WebAssembly after first load to dynamically update the DOM. Like my biggest pet peeve about the WebAssembly portion is that you can't really use it for website development. You could use it for line of business app development because the page load is just not as fast. Blazor is faster as far as I can tell for that first load. It's just the way that they're loading that stuff into the DOM. There's no way to preload it as far as I understand. But I think that might be changing. But this Getting Started series, I wrote it last year, and it's kind of just covers the main topics or some of the main topics I saw for building an app in Uno platform. So you got your basic getting started, how's a view stack work, which is very different from web development, but a common pattern in app development and mobile app development. Everyone I talk to always wants some type of tab page, so a little basics on getting started with that. And then the platform specific code is where things can get very difficult for new developers. So there's easy ways to do it in XAML versus C#, and the technique that they do for XAML I like a lot better than Xamarin Forms. It's very verbose in Xamarin Forms, and in Uno platform you add an additional XML namespace at the top of the file, and you just reference that, and you could then you can add a native control or you can use a shared control. It's pretty slick, and the rest is just kind of general MVVM stuff and some native WebAssembly stuff. But a lot of people I talked to liked this Getting Started guy because he kind of covers some of the high level topics. But if you want, if you're interested, if you open up the item
I
number
like how
4
you
there,
did it as a track listing, it's like an album.
My blog.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess I don't know if it's just this page that just styled like that or what.
This is how this is how my blog pages are styled.
Oh, okay. You just step off. It's kind of funny. I like it.
But thank you. If you open up item number 4 on that list, that's probably my favorite feature inside of Uno platform.
So this is something do you recommend looking at this before Xamarin Forms nowadays?
Different. Okay. So if you scroll down, we're looking for my XAML code snippets. Keep going down. The next, go back up. Sorry. Right there, that code snippet right there. So line 6 there, I define this Android XML namespace. And then line 11, I add Android specific text block. So text block is the UWP spec. I can also do a text view, which is an Android native one. So I can mix and match shared controls or native controls right in the same XAML file. And that part was really intriguing.
Yeah, so grid is a shared control, everyone. Yep. There's an implementation for everyone. But Android text block is Android specific, right?
The text block is a shared text block, so that's the UWP text block. But it's only going to show up for Android. So if you scroll down to the bottom of this page, there should be one that has an implementation for everything. Another big XAML.
So like if you took that XAML, you compiled it for iOS, it would compile and launch, but it just wouldn't show anything. Is that the deal?
Yeah. So this one that you're looking at now has a hello world for Android, iOS, and WebAssembly. And if we ran it as UWP, nothing would show up.
Okay. Yeah.
So that text block control there, that's all a shared UWP control. But if I wanted to, I could swap that out for the Android native control, which is, I believe it's called text view. So you can mix and match those shared and native controls, which is quite different from what you can do in Xamarin Forms. Like in Xamarin Forms, you would need to create a shared abstraction code and then render that text view out. But in Uno platform, you could mix and match those very nicely. But I got to ask the question. You just asked it. When would I use this over Xamarin Forms? And it's that famous answer of it depends. So right now, Xamarin Forms does not have support for, or does not have as good as support for WebAssembly. So if I'm going to be building a line of business application that needs to support Windows, mobile, and web, I'll probably lean towards Uno platform because it hits those target goals. If I'm building an application that is going to be just for Android and iOS, but I have a business rule for my designers that it needs to look exactly the same, and they don't care about the iOS design patterns versus the Android design patterns, I would probably still use Uno platform because of how much easier it is to manage those styles across the platforms. But if I'm building an iOS and Android app and they want us to follow more of what they recommend on those native platforms, then I'd go towards Xamarin Forms. It really just depends. I hate to say it depends because we say that all the time, but
well, that's the question. Like, what does it depend on?
So, you need to ask yourself, what's your target audience? Where do you want your application to be available on? If I want an application to hit every main target, including Mac OS, including Linux support, I'm probably going to lean towards Uno platform. 9 times out of 10, if I'm building an Android and iOS app, I'm going to go with Xamarin Forms right now. Mainly because I'm more comfortable with the custom renderer architecture there. Performance is another thing. If I need to build an Android and iOS app that's super performant, I'm probably going to go with Xamarin Forms because right now the app load time is much faster in Xamarin Forms than Uno platform. Once the app is loaded, they're comparable, but that initial load time is a little bit longer with Uno platform. So you got to ask yourself these questions. So if I'm going to build an app that I want to deliver to the App Store as an indie developer, I might lean towards Xamarin Forms more than Uno platform because it's a little bit easier to make a high performing app for that initial startup. But most of my apps right now are line of business apps for the enterprise. So Uno platform seems like a good fit, but we still use Xamarin Forms. It's just we make an educated decision on why before we start using one of these things.
So yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, I'm just trying to map it right now. Like I have a short-term contract I'm doing right now where they just need a cross-platform desktop app. So I'm just like spitting it out in Electron. Something like this would fit the bill as well.
Yeah, I mean, Electron does the job. And my problem with Electron is most Electron apps I see are kind of memory heavy.
It's definitely that. Yes. I mean, there's no question about it. It does have some. I mean, the development experience isn't too terrible. And I did find there's a really pretty decent Electron React boilerplate project, which, I mean, they do a lot. So I imagine what a lot of that is, the things that they do is all about, is around making sure you have the good defaults with optimization. So I can't be certain because I'm, haven't double checked all that. But yeah. In this case, that's not a particular concern, but yeah. It would certainly be. I mean, I guess at that point it more becomes an issue of like, well, who do you want to maintain and how easy do you want them to be defined? How much time are they going to have to scale up? Because certainly, Uno platform is going to be more time to scale up on something than React. I would assume too.
Yeah, and the interesting thing with Uno platform for me, and I'll share this link. You don't necessarily need to open it, but I've done a lot of work with DNN, formerly .NET Nuke, and what I did in this blog post was I took Uno platform as a WebAssembly target, and I used it to build an admin control and I injected it into DNN as an iframe. So if you scroll down to the very bottom right before it says conclusion, there's a little animated GIF there of it loading inside of a DNN website, which yeah, that one right there. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is DNN admin page. You got the sidebar loaded up, and I just loaded up Uno platform, which is being loaded into this this admin experience page here. And the thing that I found interesting with Uno platform is you can now take a desktop app and inject it into an existing app. Let's say your admin experience, like in DNN, the admin experience looks very fluent design. And I don't like working with the React.js library that comes with it, and they don't really support it for third-party modules. So I thought, well, if Fluent Design looks mostly like the admin experience, I can now go ahead and do the XAML, do the UWP development that I know and I'm familiar with. I can compile it for web, and I can inject it into my DNN website as an admin page, and now it looks like all the other admin pages, and I can work much faster because I don't really do a whole lot of React work. I'm not familiar with it, and this is just another way for me to move faster. Downside is that initial load, but it's an interesting approach for CMS admin development, and this doesn't apply just to DNN. This blog focuses on how to get it working in DNN, but the concept applies to other CMSs or web development tricks that you want to do if you had somebody that was familiar with UWP and you wanted them to build your admin tool chain. And now you can also run it on desktop if you wanted to, but in this scenario I was just focusing on WebAssembly.
I mean, that's cool. Are you at the point where, like, if you needed to like build a web application now, you probably would do something with WebAssembly, or would you still reach for web tech?
If I was building a website, so
a web application, let's say.
Yeah,
not static content.
Yeah, a website, or no, sorry, a web app, I would use Uno platform. It's the reason why I would use Uno platform is the toolkit the tool chain that I get in .NET. I'm just very familiar with, and I'm not as familiar with web. And I would probably be writing a lot of jQuery, to be quite honest. So I would be more effective with using something like Uno platform.
So let me rephrase it. Let me take a step back and kind of do a little bit different. So you have a client that needs a business web application, and they don't particularly need any cross-platform stuff, and you're going to hire a developer to help build. would you still say like .NET app and Uno platform? I think they could do it better, faster, the learning curve, or would you and do WebAssembly, or would you probably look to more standard JavaScript web tech?
I would still go down the WebAssembly approach.
Nice.
And
Okay.
the reason why I would go down the WebAssembly approach is when I do web app development and I start messing with the styles, even if I have a web components library I pull in, I got to make sure it works in all the browsers. Because they have implemented the WinUI spec in WebAssembly for me. When I say I want my borders to be a certain thickness, or I say I want this to be positioned a certain way on the screen, it's just going to look that way, and I don't need to worry about it. And when I do Uno platform, I get the entire UWP/WinUI toolkit. So I don't need to worry about bringing in a components library. I don't need to worry about which third-party control am I using. If I want to create a dropdown, I can just use the UWP dropdown and then restyle it. If I want to create a little pop-up, I can just use the UWP flyout or dialog, and it just renders it correctly in the web. So it's almost like grabbing like a Telerik or Syncfusion control toolkit out of the gate and say, well, we're going to use this to build our app. Well, I have the WinUI toolkit, and it gives me all those controls. So I'm just taking the building blocks and putting them together, as opposed to building them from scratch each time.
Yeah. They just have better building blocks, in your opinion. Cool. Yeah, I mean that makes me excited to hear, because like I've been waiting for 5 years at this point for someone to be saying like, all right, we got a WebAssembly solution that we're actually recommending for web stuff. That's cool. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever end up using Uno, but like certainly hopefully more coming. We get to stop writing JavaScript all the time.
I mean, and that's kind of the approach with Blazor. I mean, they say C# instead of JavaScript, and I've heard a lot of good things with Blazor, and I've looked at some large open source projects with it. I haven't shipped anything in Blazor personally, but there's a lot of promise to it. Again, on the web app side of stuff, and the WebAssembly, I'm not too sure about, but definitely if you do like server-side Blazor, my biggest problem is if someone goes idle for like 30 minutes on your page, there's like a black shadow that goes over the entire page saying you lost your connection, because Blazor server-side is all SignalR based. And if you're idle too long, it drops the connection, and then the page content's not loaded there. And I was thinking about rebuilding my blog in Blazor. I was like, well, if someone's just idling on my page for 30 minutes and got this black shadow, that's not a good user experience. They should just be there, and they should just be able to consume the content.
I mean, yeah, you would think you could just do, and then like some sort of exponential back off of querying things and tie it into switch to tab events and things like that. That seems, I mean, an unnecessary thing. Because, yeah, especially like SignalR supports non-WebSocket stuff. Right, like it has that abstraction under the hood where you can use HTTP. Well, it is HTTP, but you can use non-WebSockets and like stuff like that. So you would think that they could just like, okay, close the WebSocket selection and then just set a timer. And at first, we're going to check.
Did I lose you?
I can still hear you.
George is froze.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Froze there for a second, George.
Oh, okay. Never. You would think that SignalR would, because SignalR supports is an abstraction over both WebSockets and lower fidelity ways of doing things, that they would just kind of drop down a level to other stuff and just turn the connection off and turn it on every once in a while to refresh.
But yes, but think of how does Blazor work? Server-side Blazor creates a SignalR connection for real-time updates, dashboard building, right? So I'm on a page that's a Blazor server-side page, and let's say I'm viewing my page hits. Okay, that number gets updated every time someone new visits my page. And if I have a high traffic page, the number's going to keep going up and up and up. And if I idle for too long, there's no reason, the server's going to look at it and say, well, there's no reason to send information to this user because they're clearly not looking at the data anymore. So we time them out. There's because of the real-time updates between the server and the client sides in that model, it makes sense why they cut those connections, because they could be eating up a lot of bandwidth of sending all of that communication back to each client that's connected. So I don't think it's necessarily an oversight or a mistake. I think it's there intentionally to prevent clients from hogging too much bandwidth that go idle. I know that you can configure it, but it's I don't have a good answer of an appropriate solution for that. I don't know if the same thing happens with a WebAssembly, for example.
Well, yeah, I would assume it doesn't. I mean, or that it's clearly in your hands. But that's the thing. Like, yeah. So I understand that, but then the solution seems to be don't keep an open connection. Just have like a single line of Java, like well, not single line, but a little bit of JavaScript code automatically emitted on the page. That in that situation where they've been idle for a while, it just closes the connection, but then opens it up every once in a while to check what's on the server, and maybe so. Yeah, you would think. I mean, if that doesn't exist now, I don't see why they couldn't add it.
And that might be something you can customize.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. This is you doing any of this stuff, Claudio, in .NET world?
I am not at all.
Are you doing web stuff at all?
What was that?
Are you doing web stuff?
Sort of. Well, the main project that I'm working on for my current client, yes, it's web-based, and we are on Angular for that specific project because it's a line of business type of project. But I'm focusing mostly on the backend side of things. Surprise, surprise. So I'm focusing on that and on the end-to-end tests for the main app in Cypress. That's where I'm spending most of my time on these days. I am still experimenting a little bit with Flutter, mostly like going over some tutorials and things just to see whether I like it or not. A couple of weeks ago, I guess I can rant a little bit. I mentioned about like I don't like the code that I see as it describes like UIs, and so I looked for like, okay, I want to find good examples of clean code in Flutter. So I found this one post here, right, where the author shares. I can go down to the code. The heck? Oh, what's up? What? Oh, that doesn't sound right. Where's the code? Oh, right here. Right? Man, this makes me like throw up in my mouth, right? So describing a UI where I see child, children, children. Like, what the hell is happening here, right? And all this.
But I mean, whatever. You could track that pretty easily. Right?
I know, man. The thing is, even like, yes, okay, yeah. There's this whole arrowhead anti-pattern that's forming here. You can extract that. So if you keep going down, it's like, okay, that's the guy's example of bad code, right? And all this is disgusting as far as I'm concerned. And then you look at the cleaned up version, still, man, I mean,
it's not much better.
I don't want to see all this chow children. It's like, I just want to see what I need to see. Not all of these plumbing crap.
What's your drive to go to Flutter? Is it the MVU style programming?
It's just seeing what else is out there. Because as I shared maybe now a month or two ago, my first choice was going to be Xamarin because of my C# / XAML WPF background. But I had such a hard time getting it to work on my.
Oh, it's awful.
on my Mac. Yeah, so that like threw me away big time. It's like, okay, I cannot afford this. Let me have a look at Flutter since I keep hearing good comments about it. So right
You run
now
into similar problems with Flutter because of the emulators and simulators?
I have not.
Oh, you have not? Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah, so that was the thing. Like it took me 6 hours to try to get something running for Xamarin on my Mac. I couldn't. I couldn't create a new project. So I'm like, I'm done with this. Let me try Flutter. And then within like 45 minutes, I had like a little Hello World, running on my Mac, on the iPhone emulator, on my iPhone device. Everything that I
Oh,
couldn't
that's
do in
awesome.
6 hours on Xamarin. That's why I said, okay, let me give it another look at Flutter. But still, it's ah, I cannot get over this kind of stuff. Like
So,
the code, which is the part where I'm going to spend most of my time. I don't like dealing with this kind of code. Honestly, it's eh.
so I got a couple questions for you on your Flutter research. I've looked at Flutter before, and one of the issues I had was, and this kind of segues into or circles back to the accessibility conversation we had at the beginning, is when you create a control in Flutter, it's using Skia as a rendered UI. So you're not really getting a truly native control. And since Google made it, I would assume that they took into account accessibility. But I was wondering if you had any experience when through your research if the controls actually are accessible or not.
Sorry, man. I have not run into that at all yet. It's a
Because
good
when
question.
you compare that to something like the stuff we've been talking about today, Xamarin Forms, Uno Platform, you can use Skia to do a rendered UI if you really want to, but but that opens up a whole Pandora's box of things. But all the controls that you're using are actually creating a native control.
Hmm, okay.
But the
I
thing I
will
was going
say,
to mention
Comet.
about, oh god,
Oh, no, I was just gonna say the fact that like syntax like this bothers me. Like the thing is like from a practical standpoint, having this type of syntax, I totally agree is a good idea for that to be available, for things to be rendered like that, and being able to look at things at that level because it's very, very explicit. But the fact that syntax like that bothers me as well is exactly what's kind of like driven me to Lisp style languages because and stuff with like really good macro support because I can like rewrite stuff too, so that I can use a nicer syntax and just have it generate that under the hood. And I mean, in this case, you could probably just do it with regular functions and stuff like that, but it's just not
Oh,
as
now I'm.
not yet.
so
Dude, can you repeat the last like 40 seconds of what you just said?
Yeah.
You were about the text and then my connection dropped. Oh man.
I think it dropped again.
The
Okay.
fact that this sort of syntax bugs me as well. I mean,
Okay.
that's what has driven me in large part to Lisp languages and ones with like really good macro support because then like I like this because it's very explicit and you want to go down and look at that level and I don't love there being a bunch of magic that you can't drill down into easily, but then I don't want to write this stuff, and I don't want to people be reading it unless they go down a level. And so, like, that's kind of what macros bring to the table. It's like having the language be able to work on like, it's like a built-in way of having different views on the language where you can like expand it with further detail.
Right.
So yeah, that's absolutely like the reason why I'm like looking at Lisps a lot and stuff, learning about
So
racket and so on.
have you guys heard of the Comet project that James Clancy
Yeah.
from Xamarin has been working on?
I have not. Tell us
So
more
this
about
is
it.
actually going to be put into .NET MAUI for the release later this year. It is an
Maui
MVU
is
on.
just Can you
What's that?
explain that to? Can you
Yeah,
explain
so
to me what Maui?
So Maui is the evolution of Xamarin Forms. It stands for Multi-App UI Platform, and it's where Xamarin Forms will be brought into the system dot namespace, and they're going to support the standard what you see today MVVM architecture. They're going to support. They're going to bring Comet in, which is a model view update, which is the same design pattern as Flutter. And there's a couple other ones they're bringing in as well. They're going to officially support Windows Desktop. They're going to support WebAssembly with it as well. There's a lot of work going into Maui, but it's the future of that multi-platform development. But Comet was a research project that started not this past summer, but the summer before, or maybe a little bit earlier than that. Maybe it was a little bit earlier than that, but it's got an interesting history about it where James took it upon himself because they were talking about MVU at Microsoft one day and just said, "I'm just going to do this and we'll see what happens." And people on the Xamarin Forums team really liked it, and now it's going into Maui, and you're looking at a code snippet right there. It's very similar to what you're seeing in Flutter, but except of making Arrowhead, you create your V stack, which is just a view stack, and then you put each control inside of that, and it'll stay at the same kind of indentation space, if you will, as you build your controls out. And the nice thing is it reduces all of that ceremony and boilerplate code that you see in an MVVM application. There's no real need for a view model. It's very easy to create your callbacks with your code, and it's just a different style preference.
Yeah.
And the other target audience for this is you don't need XAML for it. It's just all C# code.
Yeah. So you're building it, so that's kind of nice. It reminds me, that part of it reminds me a little bit that, do you remember Power Boost? Did you ever see that project?
I haven't seen
it was
that
an
one.
open source project. It's kind of similar to something like that, except they said use PowerShell for that part. And because PowerShell is such a nice, super flexible language, like it just looks really, really nice. Like building up like UI hierarchies in PowerShell. Like you don't need the new keyword or anything like that. Just like token content. It ends up looking declarative, but it isn't. It's invariant. Which is, I remember seeing it and be like, oh man, I want to find a way to do that. And then so it was just like, instead of the XAML stuff, you could do this instead. It just doesn't make your eyes blur over all the time.
Yeah, and XAML's nice because it's if you understand it, it's all right there and easy to read in that XML formatting. But if you don't understand it, good luck. It's got a little bit of a learning curve to it.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like I said, like I do like, cause I don't like coding, and I don't have to do one WPF project ever, but like actually writing all that XML was just a pain. I don't like it. It's far from the biggest issue, but like it was pretty gross.
And that's the common complaint that I hear is that XAML can become very verbose. And that's one of my problems with, like, one of the reasons why I like Uno platform is you're still using XAML, so I'm still familiar with a lot of the techniques that go into good XAML development, but like the on platform is a technique in Xamarin Forms to render stuff for iOS, Android, or update properties based on that. And as we were looking earlier in Uno platform, it's literally one line of code. I just prefix it with the Android colon or iOS colon. To do that same thing in Xamarin Forms, it's like 8 lines of XAML. They've made it easier with some markup extensions, so you can do it in one line, but you need to create It's called the on platform control. Then underneath that, you got to create the on, and then underneath that, you create a platform one for iOS, and then under that, you create a platform one for Android, and then under that, create a platform one for UWP. It becomes very messy very quickly, and XAML has a history of becoming too verbose.
Mm. I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So we've got a couple.
the-
Yeah, we've got someone else on the call. Yeah, actually, we Jay dropped off. Hey, Mark, welcome to the Brown Bag. We've got 10 minutes. Anything you want to ask about, talk about? Just open up your mic.
Yeah. Make sure to unmute if you're speaking.
Or I guess not. That's fine too.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, .NET heavy one, but that's fine.
I don't mean to steal the show of just talking about .NET.
How many times have I done it? Yeah. And every time I'm like, I don't want to keep talking about this. But
yeah. Well, Claudio, and I guess this goes for anyone that has my contact information. If you really want to give Xamarin Forms another shot and you need some help getting your environment set up, shoot me an email or something, and we could chat. I'd be more than happy to get on a call with you and see what your problems were and see if I can help.
All right, I appreciate it. Yeah, what I'm planning to do is to just finish off this one Pluralsight course on Flutter, just to wrap it up and see what's up there. There's one more course that's it's like how to implement MVVM in Flutter, so I want to give a shot at that as well, just to see what the code looks like, where they went with that, and then just probably clean up my Mac environment, and then I'll give you a buzz.
Yeah, the biggest problem, and I have this conversation with the Xamarin Forms team all the time, is the biggest problem is there's a massive barrier to entry, and if you can identify what those problems are, we could relay that to the people over at Microsoft so they can try and fix those problems. Because whenever I talk to people like David Ortnow, who's one of the program managers over there, he tells me that they know that there's a barrier to entry problem. They've tried to fix them, but they don't hear exactly what those problems are. So it's hard for them to fix stuff that they don't know. They're not saying that I'm not saying shame on you at all. I'm just saying, like, if we can identify what it is, I can help you get in touch with the right people so you can report it, or I can go and report it for you if you want. So they can try and solve it. And it shouldn't be that hard. What's that?
Isn't that what the
I mean, I
changed and eviscerated.
You broke up a little bit there. Did you say, is that what the
MVP program? I said, like, yeah, like that's kind of what the old MVP and Insider programs are for, weren't it? Like,
yeah,
so that they would be getting that feedback.
Yeah, right. And I am a Microsoft MVP in developer technology, so I do have a little bit closer relationship with some of those people over there. So I'm more than happy to help get you in touch with those people or go over and chat with them. It doesn't matter to them if you're an MVP or not. If you want to participate in the Xamarin community, it's a little bit different than the rest of the .NET community, at least in my experience. It's smaller, so it's a little bit more. It's got that small community feel.
Right. I wonder if it's quite possible that part of my problems when I was trying that a couple of months ago was maybe the JetBrains Writer integration on my Mac with the whole Xamarin.
You're using JetBrains?
That's what I was trying to, because I didn't even have a Visual Studio for Mac on that machine anymore.
I mean, I use Rider. It works. You can do Xamarin Forms development on Linux with Rider. Like, I know all that stuff works, But the
Okay.
biggest problem is getting your emulators and simulators set up. So if you have those things set up, you should be good, but you might need to have Visual Studio for Mac for Rider to work. I also can get you, if you want to use Rider, I could also get in touch with one of the dev advocates from Rider that I'm friends with that would be able to help. So I
Okay.
got some context to share, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. Good. Yeah, I'll keep all that in mind. My main issue with it was that this is an older Mac machine, so I don't have a lot of disk space available. So as the thing
Right.
started like installing the Android stuff, I'm like, no, I'm not even wanting to do
That's the
Android.
worst.
Yeah, no, it's bad enough that like Xcode alone takes up 18 gigs of my disk. It's like, are you crazy?
Yeah,
Right.
my Mac is old as well. I bought it like 3 or 4 years ago secondhand because those things are so expensive, and it's got no space for any of this stuff. It's awful. I hate doing any development on it.
Yeah, it's my thing. This is a 5-year-old machine. I mean, it still works fine for like my Ruby on Rails things that I do on the side and things like that. But as soon as I start like trying out different new things, there goes my disk space, and then that's it.
Yeah.
Don't do anything.
Uh,
Yeah, it looks definitely. I thank you for offering support because I do want to get to that at some point. Um, but it's just since it's something that I'm doing just on the side for some of my pet projects, it's like there's only so much time I can put on it.
right. And that's how I got into Xamarin Forms. I was doing WPF when I worked at Surge, and I saw Xamarin Forms as this cool technology to do mobile. Like, I know XAML. It's like the
Yep,
same, right? Let me
yep.
go learn it. And I learned very quickly the XAML spec in Xamarin Forms is different from WPF and different than UWP. And it was a little bit of a learning curve getting started, but most of the problems I ran into was just getting the environment started. Before I got into Xamarin development, I used to work on VMs. I had like a Linux host machine, and everything was VM based. And with Xamarin Forms, you need the hardware that can run those virtual machines for your emulators and simulators. And uh,
Uh,
once you are able to run those, it's just a matter of fact of getting the SDKs installed and building with the right tool chain.
okay, good to know. Awesome.
What's another thing that I did back then? What I ended up using for a long time was Genie Motion, which I used the free version of it, but there's also a paid version of it, and it was the easiest way for me to get an emulator on my computer that ran at regular speeds instead of like 10 seconds a click.
Okay,
Um, they've done a lot to improve the performance of those. They should run pretty well on Mac OS. Uh, the Windows ones had a lot of problems for a long time, but as long as you don't have like any weird things like that set up, once you get those emulators going, you should be good.
okay, interesting. Yeah, I noticed that the emulator part, like as I was trying the Flutter stuff, that one was surprisingly easy. I'm like, okay, if this is how it is, the whole experience, I'm loving it, but still not quite there. Very cool. Well, guess we're at the top of the hour. Time to wrap things up. This was a great discussion. Thanks, guys.
All right. Yeah, that was great.
Good stuff.
Thanks a lot, everyone. I do have to drop off. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. See you all next week. Bye.
Thanks. Bye
Thank
now.
you. Bye.